Will it be an epic debate debacle or the greatest show on earth? President Biden and former President Trump will officially face off on two debate stages, June 27th and September 10th. It's time to wake up, Washington, because voters will be watching these debates closely, and the jabs have already begun. Biden challenged Trump with this video posted to X.
Donald Trump lost two debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal.
While Trump posted this to Truth Social, quote, "Just tell me when. I'll be there. Let's get ready to rumble." So what are Americans really thinking about these upcoming debates? Here's what some of you had to say.
The bickering, the going back and forth, the slandering and the name calling, that doesn't help anybody.
I have a little bit of dignity about yourself and show some respect, whether you disagree or not.
Bluffs and people playing it safe. I feel like the election is this year, so say what you gotta say.
I would like to see respectful discourse, of course, between Biden and Trump. Fortunately, probably that won't be happening.
I can't be disappointed anymore. It's been a crazy 8 years.
We count major with the vote. We can go to the red side or we can go to the blue side. So they need to get themselves together if you plan on having our vote.
Joining us now is a man who has covered many debates over the years. He's also my boss, the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Bob, it's good to see you.
Hey, Julia.
So, just to start off with, we're expecting fiery debates, knowing that this is going to be a rematch from 2020. We all remember Chris Wallace, when he was at Fox News, not being able to get a word in between Trump and Biden during the first 2020 debate. Let's take a look at that.
Oh, really?
Mr. President, it's an open discussion.
I think you did.
Mr. President,
only guy that
let
did
him answer.
He stood up.
No,
He stood up
the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
that
get rid of
is
the trust.
you know what, you're
absolutely not
stop.
true.
You're doing it.
You're going to
You're on
have
tape.
True.
Gentlemen. I hate to raise
Chris,
my voice,
he's
but I
on
see it
tape.
seems to be. Why shouldn't I be different than the two of you?
And that's Trump. But at one point, Biden actually told former President Trump to shut up. Let's take a look at that.
It's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me, this
Hey, let me just say,
I'm not going to answer the question
why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
the question
You want to put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you
Who
shut
is your,
up, man?
listen, you're a senator. And
You're
by
the
way,
worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me
So, Bob, there's a lot of factors that play into these debates. A lot of it's the moderator. A lot of it's circumstantial as to what the candidates have been through that day. I think the second debate may have been a little bit more on track than the first one. So what can we expect from the first debate in June, but also in September?
Well, it's like a heavyweight boxing fight. They had those matchups in 2020. They're going to have different matchups in 2024. Things have changed. Biden is now president. I think Trump actually lost the presidency in that first debate. I think he was so off the rails that's what cost him the presidency, as well as some things related to COVID, because he could have handled COVID better. And he lost so narrowly. So I do expect fiery debates, but I do think that a lot of people will be in Trump's ear saying you need to calm down, don't go at that pace. And Biden's going to have to, he's going to be on the spot too, because there's concerns about his age and can he keep up with Trump during the debate. Now, certainly in 2020, Biden did well, and I think he won the debates. And this, honestly, could decide the election, these debates.
So on that note about Trump in particular being on the spot, one thing we've always asked those around him, those who support him, the former president gets this asked as well, is whether he will accept the 2024 presidential election results after what happened in 2020. Is he going to be pressed on that? And how do you think he navigates that?
It's a very good question. I don't think he's going to accept any result if he loses. But on the 2020, this is a tough part for moderators here, because do you want to go down that path? You know what Trump's going to say. He said it a million times. The moderators want to create new material. So I do think it's an open question of whether he's going to accept the 2024 debate results. He certainly did not accept 2020. Remember, in 2016, in the first primary, he lost to Ted Cruz, and he said that was rigged. So there's a pattern here. I don't think the moderators are going to harp on that. I think they want to have most of the topics, at least most of them, going forward instead of backward.
So these debates in the past have been sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates.
Yeah.
This year it's different because The Biden campaign went around them, seemed to reach out to the Trump campaign over social media. Then you had the networks getting involved. You know, us politicos know what the Commission on Presidential Debate is, but a lot of Americans outside the Beltway who might not follow politics as closely aren't as aware of what it really did to organize these debates. Talk about what the commission is and really what its absence means going forward.
Well, the commission was set up because you have these rivals who are going to be facing off, and it's been around for decades. Basically a bipartisan commission to set up the rules so it's fair to both sides. And you're exactly right, Julia. Both sides went around the commission. Trump has been very critical of the commission in 2020. And then Biden also went around the commission. And why did they go around the commission? Well, the commission had clear rules if a third party can qualify for the debate with 15% in the polls and 270 electoral votes. So don't have to be on all the states, but the states that you are on the ballot have to add up to 270, so technically you could win. That doesn't exist anymore because Biden and Trump basically did this side deal, and the commission rules are irrelevant now because this is not through the commission. So I think this was a clear end to run around RFK Jr. because he's right around 15%. Yeah. That's his goal, to get in the debates. Harvard-Harris poll recently said 71% of people want third parties in the debate. But is RFK Jr. going to get in any of these debates? Absolutely not, because I'm certain the president would say, nope, I don't want RFK Jr. If RFK Jr. is in it, then I'm out.
He's such a wild card. Polls show him polling from Donald
Trump
both.
And
Joe Biden. Absolutely.
Yes.
So and I think many people were shocked at how quickly this came together because we know the Trump camp and the Biden camp have been very stubborn on what they want to come out of these debates, the conditions they want met. But what did these negotiations look like? I mean, it seemed like one morning the Biden campaign just posted on X, Trump posts on Truth Social, networks are involved, and then there we have it.
Yeah, this was clearly in the works for a while, and amazingly they kept it under wraps because they knew the reaction would be negative from some quarters, including the Presidential Commission, including RFK Jr. So they had the networks lined up, and listen, Biden did well in the negotiation because Trump had said, I want to debate anywhere, any place. He was willing to do multiple debates. He was willing to do, and I've talked to people from the Trump campaign, they were saying, yeah, absolutely, let's do the commission and let's do some more. Let's do 6 or 7. Did they think that Biden would accept 6 or 7 debates? No, but it's a good PR move. But Biden was able to dictate the details of it because Trump was already saying, any place, anywhere. Okay, well, we want this and this and this. And the Trump people said, okay.
One thing Trump has been pushing for is a live audience. We know he likes that spectacle. In 2016, he brought a number of women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual harassment or misconduct to that debate against Hillary Clinton. It's not the first time. I mean, we will see these debates take place in a television studio, but it's not the first time we've seen this. Biden did it in 2020 against Bernie Sanders during a CNN debate. How will Trump fare without an audience? Because he's someone who really does feed off of the energy around him.
He does, and he's even fed off the negative energy back in the 2016 Republican primary debates. There were, remember, Jeb Bush was the front runner at first, and Trump was getting basically booed by some in the stands. And what did he say? He said, oh, they're a bunch of lobbyists. They're from Washington. So he even played off the negative energy. Yeah. So I think it is going to be tough for Trump because he loves that feedback and he loves to make people laugh and people turn against his rival. So that's going to be a little bit of a difference. As you know, Julia, sometimes they say everybody has to be quiet in the crowd, but rarely are they quiet in the crowd.
They're very excited. So I want to draw our attention to issues and how they're going to play out in the debates. A recent ABC Ipsos poll found that 85% of adult Americans surveyed said inflation was an important issue. No surprise there. In a plurality, 44% said they trust former President Trump more than Biden on inflation. Why is that? And what does Biden need to do to gain America's trust back on the issue of inflation and the economy? I mean, it just seems to be this never-ending messaging struggle for him.
I don't think Biden can win because we're less than 6 months away, but he's got to close the gap on those numbers you showed. Listen, inflation has gone up under Biden. You can say certainly that was because of the COVID bills that were passed, trillions of dollars of aid. There were bills that were bipartisan. There were bills that were partisan that just Democrats passed. But I think what Biden needs to do is have a little Bill Clinton in him, where show some empathy. Listen, we've been through some tough times. I understand it. Biden sometimes can be very defensive. He can actually misconstrue what the inflation rate was when he got in, and it really was low, but it did go up under his watch. Again, you can blame the prior administration for that, but facts are fact when they went up. I do think Biden should say, listen, we're on the right track. Things are getting better. Which inflation? It is. The rate has gone down, but I understand your pain. That Bill Clinton message he hasn't really delivered, and I think he would be wise to deliver that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch for that. I know in a recent CNN interview, he did not.
He did not.
He did not do that. So we'll see what he does there. So inflation obviously isn't the only issue. There's other aspects of the economy, immigration, democracy, crime, safety, healthcare, foreign policy. Obviously, the war in Gaza has been playing a big role domestically. Which of these issues will Trump and Biden hit the hardest when making their case on the debate stage?
Well, Trump loves talking about the border. He loves talking about his wall. So I think he's going to lean into that as well as the economy, because there's the advantage, honestly, on both issues, on both immigration and the economy. But Biden has a big issue in his pocket, and that's abortion. He's going to be talking about that nonstop. We've seen it, and you've reported, and our staff has reported on, even in red states, pro-choice amendments are passing. That is just very shocking. So Democrats have the abortion issue. They did well on that in the midterm elections. Everyone was expecting, including me, a red wave. The red wave didn't happen. Why? Because of abortion. And this is going to be the first presidential where it's really leaned into, and that could save Biden's job, but it may not be enough.
So, you know, those of us that cover this, we are obviously very much invested in these debates. They're huge dates on our calendar. I mean, gosh, in Washington, D.C., bars have specials and restaurants have special. It's must-see television for people in the political world. But how much do Americans outside of the Beltway, or who aren't really tuned into politics but will vote in November, how much are they really paying attention to these debates? And historically, have they ever moved the needle?
Well, I think they have moved the needle. Reagan did very well in debates. I think, as we discussed, Trump struggled in the 2020 debates. But in 2016, Trump did fairly well, very well in the Republican primary debates. He held his own against Hillary Clinton, and that made the difference. I think a lot of people are tuning out, but for these debates, if they happen, you never know, they could just fall apart. But I do think it's good that they're having the debates. I think they should have more. But I do think people are going to be watching them because, again, even though we have a polarized country, 31%, according to Harvard-Harris, still say they're deciding who to pick on president. They're not happy with the two choices. They're looking at third parties, but they haven't decided. So if you win that 31%, or most of that 31%, you're going to be president.
So, I know you mentioned Biden needing to be more empathetic when it comes to the inflation issue, but ultimately when it comes to the debate stage, what does Joe Biden need to do, and what does Donald Trump need to do to come off that stage, and being able to say they won the debate? I mean, they're both going to say they won the debate.
Of course.
But,
yes.
Really to move the needle.
That's a safe prediction. They're going to say they both won the debate. Well, Biden's expectations have gone low. I mean, I think he's rewatching the 2020 debates as I have recently. He has aged since then. So, but expectations are low. So I think that he needs to just go toe-to-toe with Trump like he did in 2020. And make his case about how things are going to get better. Not looking backward, because again, a lot of people are not pleased with what's going on with the economy and the border right now, but where are we going as a country? Trump has to be, honestly, he's got to be more presidential. In that 2020 debate, he was not presidential. He really was, in a lot of ways, he was kind of a maniac. I mean, he just could not stop talking, and he got some bad advice, and I think he's going to get some better advice now. Let Biden Biden speak. As we know, Biden talks himself in corners sometimes, makes some gaffes. Give him the stage. Let him maybe make a mistake. And if Biden does make a major mistake or has some type of issue where we're talking about age the next day, Biden's age in particular, well, remember, that convention is after the first debate.
Yeah.
So there'll be trigger. Well, maybe Biden shouldn't be at the top of the ticket. Do I think Biden's going to be the nominee? Yes, I do. But he's got to hold his own in that debate because people are concerned about his mental acuity.
Absolutely, including Democrats.
Including Democrats,
Cases,
exactly. Absolutely, yes.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Julie.
Leading up to the 2024 presidential election, the nation has been rocked by pro-Palestinian campus protests, dueling battles at the U.S. southern border, and even abortion has made a surge to the top of voter concerns. While lawmakers and candidates navigate this landscape of issues for voters, there is one that Biden just cannot break from: inflation. The U.S. economy continues to be front and center for Americans, and rightfully so. People are spending more on goods than they ever have. So what does this mean for the president? The Dow recently hit the highest it's ever been. The unemployment rate is hovering just under 4%, the lowest it's been in 65 years. But voters aren't feeling the effects, and that in itself could decide who makes it into the Oval Office in November. It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, as always, thank you so much for joining us. You know, we continue to talk about the economy and its importance. A new ABC News poll shows Trump is actually trusted more than Biden on inflation by a double-digit margin. Does this boil down to the president's messaging, or does Trump really have a better track record on inflation issues?
Well, one, I think it is messaging. The President Biden likes to cite things like job numbers and the stock market and things like that. But by and large, inflation is what's driving people's opinions, and it's just more expensive to buy food and rent and go on vacations and things like that. Also, Donald Trump likes to remind people that while he was president, we had a great expansion in job creation and wealth and cheaper housing and lower interest rates, all those types of things. Whether or not he's the cause of that is a different question, but he is certainly claiming it, and that is certainly resonating with the voters.
Yeah, he's certainly citing that in the old moniker, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" But of course, 4 years ago now, it was the height of the COVID pandemic. So a little different type of situation here. So looking at that same poll, voters trust Trump more when it comes to every issue, or almost every issue: the economy, crime and safety, immigration, and even how to handle Israel's war with Hamas. Historically, Scott, what is the biggest concern for voters that they cast their ballot on?
Historically, is certainly the last two elections, it's been the economy, and that's 2022 and 2020. You know, as you mentioned, we were in during COVID in 2020, so everyone was wondering. A lot of people lost their jobs, how the economy was going to come back. 2022, it was the number one issue coming out of COVID, and right now it is the number one issue because I think we're still seeing some COVID after effects with the inflation and things like that. The poll you showed up there, the other interesting point is those are what I expect to be the top three issues this fall. We might see the order change a little bit, but those are going to be the top three issues voters think about this fall. And Donald Trump is not a little bit ahead. He's a lot ahead.
So, Scott, on the issue of the southern border and border security, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is hoping to bring border security front and center again by bringing a vote this week on a bipartisan border bill. By forcing Republicans to vote, most will likely side with Trump's push to halt any legislation. Could this ultimately benefit Biden in a state like Arizona, where he is currently struggling?
Yeah, it'll certainly give him a talking point on the trail. As you noted, we're not sure it's going to fully pass, certainly get through the House and be able to, for the president to sign it. This is the kind of action voters are looking for, especially on the Democratic, Republican, and Independent side. Now, they differ on what that action should be. Donald Trump's trying to line the issue up for next cycle if he wins so that he can be the one to solve it. But this is something everyone wants. Whether or not this will be the bill that gets them what they want, we'll see coming up. But it's a good campaign issue for both to talk about.
So Arizona isn't only an important state at the presidential level, it's also a big Senate state this year. Biden trails by 5 points in the state, while Democratic Senate candidate Ruben Gallego has a very comfortable lead over Republican Kari Lake. You know, this isn't the only state this is happening in, Scott. What's the disconnect between the Biden and Gallego campaigns? And zooming out, what's the disconnect between Biden at the presidential level and these, Senate Democrats running in swing states?
Well, we're beginning to see a trend where Democratic voters are enthusiastic, or at least more willing to support their senator they're voting for, or governor, or congressman, but not necessarily the top of the ticket. The last time we saw this was 2016, when there was less enthusiasm around Hillary Clinton and more enthusiasm around some of the senators and Democratic senators and congressmen there. It's early. I'd like to see the trend, but there is a separation, as you know, in Arizona. We're seeing it a little bit in Pennsylvania and a little bit in Wisconsin as well.
So while Schumer is hoping to sway voters in key states with the border security issue, we know abortion access has come front and center in both Arizona and Florida. But overall, polling shows President Biden is trailing far behind Trump in those states, particularly in Florida, which is, basically become a red state. It's no longer a swing state like in Arizona is. Will any push on abortion rights be enough to give Biden an edge with voters nationwide?
They're certainly betting on it. As you noted, Arizona and Florida are going to have some votes on it. As we just talked about, the polling doesn't necessarily reflect the closeness of that. But it is an issue that 2022, 2023, when it was on the ballot, really surged Democratic voters. And so they're going to certainly try and see if it helps Joe Biden out in these two states coming up as well.
So on the other side of the aisle, Republicans are softening their messaging on abortion, and Trump has been saying that Arizona went too far in its state Supreme Court effort to uphold a civil law, war-era law on abortion. Is this the ultimate goal with this new messaging, to essentially sway independents?
It's exactly what it is. The Arizona abortion law is interesting. Even the Republicans in the state legislature scrambled to get it repealed because they understood what it meant for independent voters and more moderate conservative voters. You see Donald Trump essentially flip-flopping on his opinion on some of these things. They're certainly moving it around more to the middle. This is a specific tack to go after those independent voters and those more moderate Republican voters too, who don't necessarily feel as strong about it.
So going back to that issue of Senate Democrats, President Biden's polling has been somewhat dismal, and now Senate Democrats are looking to shift away from Biden's messaging on issues like border security and the war in Gaza. Scott, is this strategy enough to help these Democrats in their states, or does the lift need to show unity to get through this election cycle?
At this point, I think they're trying some things out because, as you noted, the polling separation says that they've got to try something. Separation sounds now. I think if we don't see some of the polling get better over the summer, you could see, them try to unify around the message, especially near the end when all the money gets spent and coordinated. But now what we're seeing is Democrats recognizing what the polls are, and they're trying different strategies and tactics to see if they can close the gap, at least at the Senate level.
Yeah, I want to go to another poll. Some interesting numbers came out in a new survey by Harvard Harris. 71% polled want RFK Jr. or a third-party candidate in presidential debates. How is RFK Jr. currently tracking in the polls, and would he pose a bigger threat to Biden or Trump on a three-way debate stage?
It's interesting. Let's break that question down into three parts. First is, in our national average, he's been sitting right around 8 or 9, depending on the day, and that's down from as high as 12 when he was a few months ago. It stabilized a little bit, so he doesn't necessarily meet the historical Presidential Commission on Debates threshold. But guess what? We're not doing any debates like that, so he could be invited. He could find himself on stage. As far as who he helps or hurts more, when we were having this conversation a couple months ago, it was more Democratic voters. As he's gotten the message out there, he's certainly, starting to pull a little more from Republicans, depending on what state we're looking at. In Pennsylvania, he pulls a little bit more from Biden. And in Wisconsin, he pulls a little bit more from Trump. Trump has embraced him and said, hey, we might want to see him on stage. And it said that Biden's the one who's afraid to debate him. We'll see if that's just a tactic. Right now, if I had to guess, if both campaigns don't want him on the debate stage at all, because he's a wild card, doesn't really know what he's going to say or who he's going to outperform. So I don't expect him to see on the stage, and that's because I think despite what both campaigns say, I don't think either of them want him on there.
That's the sense I've gotten as well, talking to people around the campaign. So, obviously the Biden-Trump rematch could be decided by, just a handful of states, or it will be decided by a handful of states. I want to take a closer look at some of those states. Biden was able to flip Georgia blue for the first time in decades back in 2020, but how are his chances looking in that state going into this election?
Not good. That is a state that, we're still looking at it. I don't expect Biden to win again. I know he was down there campaigning recently. He's going to try and do that. Georgia's historically been a Republican state. Joe Biden pulled one out in 2020 that was a very surprising win, extremely surprising to me. I don't think he's going to be able to do it again this cycle. Doesn't necessarily need it to win the presidency, but it certainly makes states like Michigan that much more important.
So speaking of Michigan, I want to touch on that state as well. Biden won it by nearly 3 points in 2020, but now the president is seeing a significant push by progressives and Arab Americans against him in that state. As of now, Trump is up by 4 points, but are voters just using the polls to voice their dissatisfaction with the Biden administration, or are we actually seeing a red wave coming across Michigan and some of the Biden coalition that's needed essentially staying home?
I think that's what the Biden campaign hopes, that these are just opposition poll respondents, but that's not necessarily how polls work. These opinions tend to hold unless you start doing something to change those opinions. And as you pointed out, it's a couple of different issues in Michigan. For some, it's the situation in Israel and Gaza. For some, it's just traditional Black African-American voters thinking about switching their vote to Trump. They kind of cross the spectrum there. And so what my take is we're seeing a Republican resurgence in Michigan. Now, Joe Biden's going to spend a lot of money in that state, putting his message across and try and campaign. So I think we'll see that go back. But Michigan's certainly closer than it was 4 years ago. And it is because of a bunch of those issues you talked about.
Absolutely. So I want to head out west to one more state that is seeing a huge shift since 2016 and 2020, and that's Nevada, where Trump is leading by nearly 7 points. Nevada has a significant Latino population. Scott, will we see immigration policy impact how voters cast their ballots in Nevada?
Absolutely. That and the economy are going to be the number one and number two. A state like Nevada, you might see even immigration overtake the economy just because of its Western status. But the other thing to note there is, they've got a competitive Senate race there, and Jackie Rosen, the incumbent Democratic senator, is in danger as well. That state's important for a whole number of reasons, but it will be immigration. It will be the economy. We're seeing Donald Trump in multiple polls over the last couple months get anywhere from 20 to 30% of the Hispanic vote, which the Republicans haven't seen levels like that since George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004. That would be a pretty big landslide win for Donald Trump to win that much of the Hispanic vote.
And then a key state for Biden in 2020 was Pennsylvania. Decision Desk HQ has him behind Trump by 1.7 points. But Trump is also facing issues in the state after Nikki Haley received more than 150,000 votes in the state's Republican primary, and that's after withdrawing from the race. Will we see the state become a key decider in the election? We know it's got a hefty amount of electoral college votes.
Yeah, no, in Pennsylvania, it was the decider in 16, it's the decider in 20. It looks like it could be the decider in 24. That one in Michigan are the one we're looking at, and it is an intense battleground. It's Joe Biden's adopted home state. He likes to talk about Scranton, even though he's from Delaware. It's a state of Western Pennsylvania that is very strongly Trump. Lucky for us, they got their voting laws a little bit in order, so I don't think we're gonna have to wait 2 or 3 days this time around to see where it's at. But I expect that race to be within a point or two, just like the polling average.
Yeah, those Pennsylvania primary results a few weeks ago were very quick that evening. So interesting to see how the counting goes in November. Scott Tranter, as always, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Investigations into UFOs have made their ways to the halls of Congress this past year, but it's not the first time flying saucers and little green men have been the topic of conversation on Capitol Hill. Staff writer Rafael Bernal goes in depth this week on exactly what's being done to understand and investigate what the government calls UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena.
For decades, the idea of UFOs or UAPs or whatever we want to call them has fueled distrust of the government. Specifically, distrust in how the government decides what is a secret and what isn't. The stories have changed over the year, but the idea remains the same. One or several government entities have proof of advanced non-human technology. Historically, believers in flying saucers and little green men were dismissed as overeager sci-fi fans or just kooks. But we've come a long way since the 1950s. The most powerful proponent of UFO transparency yet, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, normalized and funded research on these phenomena. In 2021, Reid wrote a column for the New York Times where he said his staff told him to stay the hell away from the issue. Well, he didn't. And under his watch, Congress funded the first modern Pentagon program to research aerial phenomena. But that program largely stayed under wraps, though not classified, and it had a relatively measly $22 million budget out of $600 billion in defense spending. The Pentagon went through a few iterations of the UFO program until 2022, when it formed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Cute. AARO is so normalized that it even has a public website. That site was mandated by Congress, so we'll never know if the Pentagon really wanted it that way. In March, AARO published a historical report of U.S. government involvement with unidentified anomalous phenomena. The report concluded that there is no empirical evidence of off-world technology in UAPs or for the existence of a secret government program. So that's it. Case closed. Except the report doesn't really explain much about the UAPs we've now all seen. AARO Acting Director Tim Phillips talked to reporters in March and said most UAPs were just aero trash, old balloons and stuff. But Phillips said there have been some cases of encounters with advanced technologies, but we can't discuss that here, and declined to answer a direct question asking if that technology was tied to foreign adversaries. And that's where national security and the right to know clash. Even Harry Reid, the champion for transparency on government UAP research, said he saw some things at Area 51 that must remain classified. We now know that base played a role in the development of stealth technology, for instance. So it could easily be hiding advanced technology of very much human origin. But as Reid put it, our government constantly balances the competing priorities of secrecy and transparency in a democracy. The question is our government getting that balance right?
That's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. Leave your comments and let us know what's on your mind.